Hey, welcome back. Mitch Ashley, CTO with TechStrong Group and also principal with TechStrong Research. We are at RSA and kind of taking over a little bit for a little while for Charlene. She'll be back with an episode of TechStrong Women coming up right after this. In the meantime, we have a special edition of CISO Talk. Now, if you've tuned in before, you know we have a lively panel of experts that operate at the C-level in varying capacities, and we're going to be talking about an interesting topic that I don't think we've touched on before. Before we get to the topic, let's have our folks introduce themselves. If you want to start out, JJ, Jennifer?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Minell, or JJ, founder and principal advisor with Viszan Security, where I work with organizations to align the security, people, processes, and strategies with the technical operations teams that are implementing those strategies.
Excellent. And a new guest,
yes.
Allison Miller.
Hi, I'm Allison Miller. I'm CISO and VP of Trust at Reddit. And so there I'm responsible for protecting not just the Reddit platform and its corporate systems, but also protecting users and things like their privacy and their safety on the platform.
Awesome.
So, yeah,
important topic.
Important topic and a fun role.
So we'll have to explore that some more, kind of that expanding role. So I'm excited to hear about it. Anthony Johnson, good to see you.
Thank you. Anthony
back.
Johnson, founder and managing partner at Delve Risk, market research firm. Like I said, we're covering CISO from a number of Fortune 500 companies. So pleasure to be back.
I think the more responsibility, the more recovering.
Yeah, exactly.
For those roles. So our topic today is the Agile CISO. And we came up with this topic. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are evolving about the CISO roles. Sometimes it's taking on more of IT responsibility, kind of combining CIO, CISO, infrastructure. But I think more recently we've started to recognize that it's not just the operational role of being a CISO anymore. Yes, we still have those things, but it's being more involved in the business, more involved in the strategy, and the execution. Sometimes it's even kind of outsourcing to managed service providers, part of our security and infrastructure. Matter of fact, Matt Newcomb, who's my co-host, is not here today. He's on special assignment. He was talking about how, kind of moving to corporate networks that aren't corporate anymore. They're third party, even at office buildings. And what's the difference of working in an office building versus in a Starbucks? People in and out and all that kind of thing. So our conversation is about this being agile, because it isn't just your technical skills or being able to kind of talk business. So I'm curious, Jennifer, if you want to start us out. You talk and you call yourself an adjacent to the CISO.
Yep. Yeah. I think the CISO role, I don't want to be recovering CISO. So I've stayed just adjacent to that role. So I've had duties that overlap part of what a CISO does without taking the responsibility of a full CISO role. And I work with CISOs in organizations and sit between them and then non-technical stakeholders, or them and the technical implementers. So CISO adjacent is a good way to describe it. And I think it's been interesting watching over time, because working with the breadth of different types of customers of sizes and industries, from manufacturing to healthcare to people that are just creating software and products. Some of my clients are very heavy on-prem in a legacy infrastructure. So I think of large healthcare organizations that have, not just thousands and tens of thousands of devices endpoints, but tens of thousands of access points and millions of ports to deal with across the network infrastructure. And then in addition to all of the layers of applications and custom development that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward to, some other clients that are, they have basically zero on-prem infrastructure that they're responsible for. So everything is in the cloud. They have office buildings, but the entire building is treated like a public network, basically like if you were at a Starbucks or anywhere else. So, the shift in watching people move from one to the other, or me trying to shift and deal with one and then the other, has been kind of interesting. And it's definitely a learning curve. And it's a completely new set of skill sets. And I think everybody's kind of retooling for how to deal with outsourcing a lot of that and managing those additional people and processes and then contractors.
Interesting. Does any of that resonate with you, Allison, as a practicing CISO, or you?
Totally.
So where on that kind of spectrum do you fall? I imagine it's not all on-prem.
Reddit is cloud native. So there's a lot of interest in and acceptance and curiosity about some of these managed services or things that are outsourced, including corporate applications. My most immediate prior experience was at a bank. So also curiosity, but agility in a different way, right? Because those are companies that have a lot of existing investment tied up in data centers and that on-prem technology. And so how can they start to adopt it in a way that feels safe to them? Of course, regulated industries have other things to consider besides their own sort of agility and willingness to experiment. And so going from a Silicon Valley company to a bank and then to a younger, smaller startup technology company, I've seen a lot of different environments and CISOs try and tackle that challenge using a lot of different tools.
Interesting. By the way, what was your journey to becoming a CISO? How long have you been in that role? I just shouldn't ask how long.
Sure. I've been at Reddit for about 18 months, but this is actually my second CISO gig. And I've kind of jumped around between different types of roles. So I've spent time working as a fraud modeler. I've spent time doing policy analysis, product management in sort of security or anti-abuse related technologies. And then at the bank, I was responsible for building the technology and tools that we use to secure the bank. And so that sort of builder mindset, I think, is what I've sort of brought with me into the CISO role, is that I like standing up programs that protect platforms and people, but I want to build those protections in. And so that's sort of what brought me into this role at Reddit, because it was just a really interesting combination of things I was going to be responsible for. And so that's the other trend, perhaps, in addition to the different types of technologies that CISOs are trying to navigate, the changing nature of what risk means to different companies and what a security executive can bring to those discussions.
Interesting. I know, Anthony, risk is top of mind, something you talk a lot of people about, help them understand, because it's not a static thing.
I think when it comes to organizations, though, what's really fascinating is that I think the business is requiring this more of an agile, business-minded CISO, simply because the demands of what they actually need to grow and survive in this market is shifting. One of my big questions that I think about is whether most of the security leaders today can make that evolution, or if they can even do it at all. It's something like 52% of the CISOs across the Fortune 1000 are actually non-technical, and a good number of those have been with that organization for a long time. So they have, in my view, they have a better opportunity of understanding the business and what's actually necessary to kind of make the shift. Whereas you still have people, myself, I'm a geek, who love to talk about the geek stuff, right? But at the end of the day, that's not going to cut it in 5-10 years anymore, right? Because the business, when you look at user developers, the citizen developer, we have people coming out of college that have more development experience than some of the folks in IT, which is just kind of really interesting. And when you start to get into no code, low code, they're pulling out apps and coming up with ideas that security teams have to figure out. How do we secure this? And the business has been running on it for a year now because it's been such a critical process. So it has to be more business centric. They have to get out of the notion of just more cyber specific tools. So I think that level of agility that's shifting is a big piece of the evolution in that risk conversation.
I like that. It sounds like shining a business-centered flashlight on the shadows of our technical debt is something that a lot of CISOs are getting involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I use this model I talk a lot to is we took the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and we actually made it a business hierarchy of needs. And security is not the bottom. It's not the foundation, right? It's revenue. And just like food. And there's aspects of where you need safety and shelter and you all want that, but that's after you get the core aspects of like revenue, or food in the regular hierarchy. And when the company's trying to grow, security is awesome, but we have to hit our numbers. We have to hit our expectations. We have shareholders that freak out if not, and a lot of security leaders need to be paying attention to what did the business commit to the street? What's actually in our 10K besides our 4 security statements in there or whatever it is. And we'll see what the evolution looks like, how people keep up.
Interesting. I wonder too about, Yeah, I think I'm going to throw this out there. I think we should eliminate the term IT because there is no boundary anymore. I mean, it's all happening everywhere in the organization. Don't fight them, join them kind of thing. And let's just be real about it. I also wonder if, in a way, we kind of need to do that with security. It's not network security or corporate security or whatever, trying to protect the organization from itself from doing bad things. We need to have discuss the decided upon level of risk and measures, and those things are going to evolve and change over time because the business isn't static either.
I like the idea of bringing more people into the discussion on technology for sure. I'm not sure if I'm ready to give up having folks be specialized and be able to go deep on some of those topics. Like securing a desktop is a little bit different than securing a container. And I need folks who can do both. And incident response is a little bit different than those design reviews that we're going to need to do as we better support the business. So I do like the idea of democratizing IT and security and bringing more folks to the table. But I also think that there's something that we can bring into the discussion based on our experience and understanding of risks. I don't think it's necessarily an approach that is natural. It can be learned to be natural. It can be aligned with some of the natural things that finance and marketing do to value, cost benefit analysis of new ventures and such. But I think that there's still sort of a mindset and a piece of the discussion that security folks can bring.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite ready to ban it yet. That's a little controversial.
We'll shoot for it.
Yeah. I'm curious, Jennifer, in your adjacent kind of CISO role, I love that term. You shouldn't have told me because now I'm going to use it all the time. You have to observe, and I imagine a lot of times you're being asked to help work through some of those struggles of how to align with the organization, support the organization, but also manage risk that goes with it. What's sort of the most common things that you see people struggling with in CISO roles?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first thing, and to me, it's kind of an elephant in the room that a lot of organizations don't talk about, or just kind of as an industry, we don't necessarily talk about in whole, maybe in little pockets. And that's that there's not really a set baseline for what we consider a CISO. And there's been, jokes for the 10 years about the CISO with the little c and a CISO with the big C. And, there's organizations that I work with that are very mature and, large, mature organizations have a large, mature security practice. And they have a CISO who can build something and develop something they understand, A to B, they're ready to shift and mold and change and go acquire whatever resources or assets they need to make that happen or their own knowledge to get there. And they have some level of training to do that or mentorship or somebody has helped them do that. And then you have organizations. And so when you look at a lot of the Fortune rated companies, you have these mature systems and peoples and processes. When you look at the rest of the world, of which there are so many, many millions of like mid-market customers, and I don't deal in SMB, but let's just forget about that and stay with mid-market and up. Not everybody has that. And, one day I'm working with a CISO who's one of these mature organizations. And, on Tuesday, it might be that the CISO was the web developer last year, or the IT director a couple years, or an application developer or this or that. And so they come in with this kind of, I hate to call it narrow, but in the grand scheme of what a CISO would be doing and why I don't consider myself a CISO material, it's a narrow sliver of that. And they know how to build that. And they don't really know how to build the stuff around it and a new program. They don't know which risk models to be using for their organization and to build something from scratch. And so you're in a situation where, you're either forcing somebody to learn something so far outside of what they've ever done before and not necessarily give them the resources to do that. Or you're at the mercy of them specializing and really ratcheting down on the security within the domain that they came from, whatever that was. And so for me, it's been a real struggle because, I'm certainly not an expert across the board with things, but I at least kind of know what I don't know. And, try to steer people towards those resources to go fill in those gaps. But it's, it's certainly an uphill battle for the majority of organizations out there that, they think, okay, well, if we hire somebody who's looking at firewall logs and that's now our security analyst, and they can report to an IT director or CIO or something, and they don't even have a CISO. they maybe have a compliance officer for whatever their requirements are. And so it's really hard to start, talking to people about how to solve problems technically and controls and processes and people when they don't even have the foundation. They're talking about shingles and there's we haven't cleared the ground to lay the foundation of the house yet. So that's kind of my little soapbox struggle with that.
Your experiences?
Oh, well, I just, as you were talking, one of the things I was thinking about is sometimes when I'm talking to folks, they're like, oh, you have such a non-traditional path to becoming a CISO. I think it's been a great path because I've been cross-training across all of these disciplines: product management, engineering, fraud detection, enterprise cybersecurity, policy analysis. All of those things have really helped me. And sort of one of the things that you kind of kicked off the conversation about was, what about these technologies that we might not have on-prem, that we might outsource? If there are safe, we feel comfortable, risk-managed ways to push some of those things out, those become almost commodified components of our security program. That frees us up to do the much more interesting work of better aligning with the business. So I understand what you're describing because I've seen that too. There's a lot of folks who they kind of grow in a vertical line and then their security program is very strong where they are strong. And what kind of resources does the industry have to help grow our leaders? Because I don't know that individual companies would know how to do that. Yeah.
I think that when I think about security leaders today, I actually draw a lot of parallels to partners at a law firm, right? You might be a partner at a law firm, but you are not a contracts master in law, contracts law and HR law and housing law. I mean, there's so many different aspects of law. And security is like that today, where it's impossible to actually understand at a super granular level the nuance of how all of these technologies are going to come in to just make this one amazing masterpiece. And so people do index on, I have a lot of experience in red teaming and incident response. So let me focus on that for a little bit, and then let me get somebody who's maybe good enough here. And the organizations that can afford that are the very mega companies with hundreds of millions of dollars of budget. And maybe they do have very, very highly technical experts in line of business or functional CISOs that they've kind of commandeered out. But when you start to get to the mid-market, SMB, even below the Fortune 700, it is very, very difficult for them to compete, not even just on budget-wise, talent-wise. I mean, over the last year, you're seeing compensations shift. People leaving a role, coming back to the old company and getting 40, 50% up on base compensation, right? That's almost impossible. And then you overlay the fact that vendor software is not getting less expensive, right? They're innovating in new ways. So I need this. Oh, now we got to do this. Okay, now if I'm looking at securing GCP, I need a different solution versus securing Azure versus AWS. It's this really, really just this growing landscape that I think security leaders have to figure out, how do they step back and be a law partner and say, okay, we have the right people focused on the right areas, and I can present the broader risk context to the rest of the leadership team that literally has no hope of ever trying to, explain and understand the evolving landscape. So I think that's where the agility and the evolution of the security leader is kind of shifting towards in my mind as well.
Yeah, I have a huge amount of compassion for the medium-sized business,
Absolutely.
both technical, IT, and CISO security organizations, because in some ways they're expected to meet many, if not most, of the same requirements as larger enterprises. But without the budget, without the people, without the infrastructure, you just don't have that size.
Security is funny because it scales up. Like the bigger that you get, you have sort of a baseline and you can make incremental improvements, but it doesn't scale down. So the requirements space sort of stays the same no matter what shape or size enterprise or company or entity you are. And so it's kind of promising that some of these tools there's a wider variety of tools and services available, and they have different pricing schemes. Tools, you're probably more of an expert in this than I am, but we're looking at tools that are charging based on data throughput, right? Or number of employees. Some technologies charge that way. And so That's helpful for the mid-market, but their requirements suite is not diminished, even though their budget is.
There are vendors, I won't list them out, who will not sell the solution unless it's a minimum of 10,000 users, right? Which is just a really interesting conversation of like, all right, so you have this entire market of people who want to buy this solution. Yeah, but we're focused here. So, we're not going to break down our strategy and do that. But you also have companies, they're Fortune 1000 companies. The entirety of their cybersecurity budget, including headcount and OpEx, is sub $3 million, right? That is insane, right? And so they're sitting there on, massive aspects of revenue, really tight margins because of the business they're in. And those security teams you get 3 people, $3 million, make sure we never show up, right? In this breach. And you're like, good luck, buddy. I have no clue what to tell you. Hopefully you find some great partners that will give you some discounts here.
I want to argue the other side of that, though. So,
please.
Because, again, sitting between organizations and a lot of the vendors, including a lot of managed services for everything from entire managed outsourced networks to managed detection and risk and manage this and manage that, is I feel like I kind of applaud a vendor that understands where their solution is best positioned, whether it's, size or industry or combination of size and industry, because I don't necessarily think every solution is appropriate for every size organization. And there's certainly, a suite of products that I wouldn't put with an organization that didn't have, in fact, we talked about this earlier in a panel today, like if the organization doesn't have the people to manage that appropriately, control is only as good as the implementation of it and the care and feeding that you give it. And if you don't have the people, and if they've determined, and maybe they haven't, I'm just guessing, but if they've determined that, okay, what we think is on average, a company this size will have at least XYZ, that's the bare minimum to make this work. I do applaud that.
I think Marcus' focus is great. In that particular situation, it's more of
that's not the driver.
A gate. Okay.
It's a gate because they don't want to fragment their sales team, and which I totally get from hitting that.
The allocation is better best use of their resources.
It's the best use of their resources, but when you look across the SMBs, right, like, man, the only answer I see for SMBs is really to partner with MSSPs and those providers that can do things at scale. And have those partnerships with where they ratchet up to, we've now got 10,000 people that can do this. So now can I use this, which would replace all this other less efficient solution set. So I think our ecosystem probably needs a little tweaking to kind of.
There's so much value though in outsourcing things. I've done a lot of like real world ROI analysis because the vendors all make up their little sheet.
Somehow it always works out in their favor,
they're so cute. Yeah,
what a coincidence.
But I'll tell you that for a couple, I did my own, and one of them was basically an outsourced SOC as a service, a full managed detection response, and it had different components to it. So I started this with several different organizations of different sizes, different industries, et cetera, and started kind of adding up and saying, okay, based on what you have now, here's like a 3-year plan or sometimes a 5-year plan. And these are the people that you would need in the order that you would need them, and the average based on where you're located, the salary, et cetera, et cetera. And, the scale, like you said, it scales up. It doesn't necessarily scale down. And it's an unbelievable expense just to get 24/7 coverage to have a SOC with just even basic junior level analyst, and not even necessarily a SOC manager, not an incident response team, not somebody doing forensics, not all of these other things you still have to go outsource somehow. That barrier to entry is just so high for organizations that SMBs absolutely don't have a prayer there.
Good stuff. So let me kind of check altimeter, and I want to take the conversation in this direction. It seems like we're asking a lot of CISOs if we want you to be more strategic, more dynamic, more agile, be aligned with the business, understand the business, which I think are all important and agree with. At the same time, like I'm giving a talk on API security, and what my talk is about is to kind of equip security people with some software language knowledge about DevOps and Agile and cloud native and where all these APIs are coming from. So now all of a sudden, as a CISO, you're being asked to secure APIs. You're like, well, okay, REST is a protocol, HTTP. It's a little more involved in that. So where I'm going with this is the landscape is getting bigger of challenges of technologies and kind of problems to include in the security. How do we deal with that? At the same time, we're trying to be more forward-looking and helping the business achieve what its goals are. not be the land of no. No, don't do that because it's not secure. We can't secure it.
Well, one way that that I'm sort of approaching that is a lot of my security engineers are software developers. They're sort of engineers first, and we do a lot of cross-training with our partner teams. So, for example, we have a really awesome SRE team, and the security team cross-trains with them so that they all have sort of a similar approach to incident management, and they all know each other and can coordinate if something happens. So this idea that security is exotic and away from the business and is removed from, I work for a software company, so is removed from the actual guts of how the business works. We're sort of breaking down those silos a bit, because in truth, I don't know if I can outsource a SOC, because for someone to actually respond, they might have to go into code. They might need to know, which engineer, or at least which engineering team to kind of pull onto the line. And that's just something that it kind of requires being on the ground with that team and having those relationships. So it's hard for me to imagine outsourcing that. Although I love the idea of having it, having some burst capacity there. But that's sort of how we're thinking about it, and an approach that I've seen be successful elsewhere as well.
So at this very table, last time we did these interviews, 2020, one of the things that I said was, security people, go learn something about software architecture. You don't have to become a software expert, cloud native expert. But that's that, if you don't have those skills, go acquire it, right?
Right.
Especially as we do more software automation around security infrastructure. But not saying that I was right, but I was right.
So let me spin this a different way.
Okay.
I feel like we're saying, okay, it's the CISO's job or that team's job to take, the business requirements and translate them and then communicate them down. I feel like that hasn't been working for us. And so again, kind of sitting between the CISO and the teams doing the work, a lot of times what happens is these architects and administrators it's not communicated down to them. The end result of I need you to do this is communicated to them, but a lot of times why and the conversation of how those architects and those other individual contributors or teams they're not given the opportunity to participate in it. And so I think that there are these kind of almost horizontal silos of layers where the people that could contribute to that conversation to some degree, and probably not everybody, but some people definitely could contribute to that conversation. And a lot of organizations are not given that opportunity. And, and frankly, that's probably why I have a job. So, but it is a gap. And I feel like if the business could trickle down to a little bit closer to the feet on the street and the hands on the keyboards, and they understand, then you have that many more people advocating for whatever that business requirement or suite of requirements is that can then feed back up to the CISO or their managers or the CTO team, and especially through digital transformation projects, and be able to say, okay, well, we understand this and we understand you told us to do this, but here's this other better way to do it, or a more secure way to do it, or a more efficient or efficacious way to do it. And I just feel like that I know there are corner cases where there's some uber amazing communication up and down, but I think that is the exception, not the rule. And I think we have to stop putting this sort of choke point with the CISO to be that person or that team to do that.
They're the translation gate.
Yeah, I feel like we can do that further down.
So here's something I struggle with, though, right? And now I have the luxury of having, like I said, been a recovering CISO to now building a software company. And what I find that's really, really fascinating, and this has held true throughout my entire career, a lot of security leaders, they might know the business, but they don't know how the business makes money, right? Or they've never actually spoken to a customer, right? So when I was at the bank, I would talk to other security leaders. They're like, oh yeah, we're a bank, we do these things. I'm like, well, how do we make money? And they wouldn't actually understand the nuances of how trades were transacted or how we actually would handle and convert off of currency. And like, these things are really, really important because arguably the other business heads do know how they make money. And so they have a different view of risk of like, hey, we got to hit this target. But what the security leaders and technologist leaders are really good at is I can secure a network, but they have to know, I think they have to have a deeper appreciation and understanding of why we're securing the network. And as a, building software now, I find myself doing things that I'm like, man, Anthony 4 years ago would totally kill me for doing this right now. Like, there's no way I would have let this slide.
Stop myself.
Right. But when I go back to, I would totally have stopped myself. But then I would go back and be like, all right, but if I don't do this, then the company's not going to grow. And then we're not going to have a business to secure. Right. So it's a little bit, I guess I have a little bit of a different view on it a bit.
What you're saying resonates with me, and it's why I tend to pick roles where I can be part of the business. I don't like being in a situation where it's like, oh, the business needs this, the business is resistant. I'm the business, I'm part of the business. We were very intentional when we were naming my role. So I'm the CISO and VP of Trust. It could have also been a VP of Risk, right? It's a lot about sort of product risk and some regulatory risk, some of the other things that we're dealing with. But I wanted it to be trust because I wanted it to be clear that we are bringing value to the business and we're making the product better. We're making the business better. But I also agree with JJ. The why and the how are both very important. And the why, I think if we have CISOs who are good business minded, such that they can kind of speak the language of their colleagues, the why kind of works itself out, but the rubber meets the road with the how. And so I hope that my teams are empowered, that most of the how can be decided upon, and that I would only need to get involved, or management only needs to get involved when there's a disagreement that can't be worked out by those folks who are actually our hands on keyboards.
Yeah. But they have to understand the big picture instead of the directive. And I think that's where, and I mean, just knowing you for a long time, I imagine you do a wonderful job of that. But I think that's where I see so many of the challenges is, so for example, when I was at this is anecdotal, but I was at a conference for, very technical people in networking and wireless. And with my new book, I address, risk and compliance and how to align network security configurations with that. And, one of the things I shared with them is, sometimes if somebody's not compliant, organization's not compliant, that's a choice. And there might be a fine, and there's just a line item in the budget for that fine. And that just blows some people's mind that are technical. Mm-hmm. And so it's that, the big picture, what are we trying to do, instead of the directive of do this configuration, when probably the person telling them, and I'm being a little silly here with the specific configuration, but they get them some narrow directive. This person doesn't understand the ramifications of that specific directive necessarily. And then the person who's doing it doesn't understand what the intent was. So intent-based strategy.
I remember at one of my previous organizations, we were talking about something, and the answer that came back was, well, let them sue us. We've got thousands of attorneys, and by the time this gets anywhere, they'll probably be out of business. And it was just this like, oh, okay, big bank takes little bank kind of conversation. I guess that's what we're going to do.
Things aren't
and we just
fair.
And we just moved on, right? Like, and it was a real big piece for me to be like, but the compliance, it was like none of it mattered. Like, let them sue us. That's fine. That's why we have 1,000 plus attorneys.
I worked construction when I was a teenager, and one of the phrases that struck me that way was good enough for who it's for. And that was the customer decides what the expectations are. The business decides what it needs. Kind of same idea. I think this idea of Agile CISO is an Agile leader. That's really what it is. 'Cause it's not just you being Agile, it's your organization. It's giving the context, helping with most of my staff meetings, 3/4 of it is why. Here's what's happening in the business. This is what I know about that might help inform you with what's happening, because you're being asked to do A, B, and C, and you're like, why is A important? I'm fine with the others. So it's helping our organization, because I remember you're going to Cisco Live, I think, to another conference. And I remember back in early 2011 or so, my top network engineer said, I'm going to the Cisco conference. What should I go check out? And I said, Python. And he said, what's that? And I said, Python. He said, it's all going to be software. All these boxes you're buying, most of them are going to change. They're not going to be what they are now, because I just got done working on products doing that. And so our role is to help bring people into the paradigm shift that we can help with and help them be agile. So we've got the team with us. Yeah. So we're bringing in software people when we need software help and expertise. Anyway, that I don't know if that's consistent with.
No, I love that. you're talking about agility in terms of adaptation, right? Because what a company needs from a security leader kind of depends on the company, as well as what that leader's skill set or sort of preferences are. And I also smile when I hear your description, because I love innovation. So for me, being an Agile CISO means being an Agile leader, but also one who is probably going to end up changing how things work in order to make them work better.
You have to thrive on change, I think,
Absolutely.
to be a leader these days.
Yes.
So let's do this. I think we're kind of getting close on our time here. How about this as our parting thought? What do you think is from a CISO mindset when you come to RSA this year? And we're back in person, and a lot of things have changed. Some things haven't. What do you think that question that people are trying to answer? Doesn't have to be the same question. We all have different perspectives. What's the questions that they're trying to answer by coming to RSA? You want to start, Anthony?
I think that this is a little bit different. RSA is different this year, particularly because they spent the last 2 years getting information, invites, just data stuff thrown at them. And so a lot of security leaders are like, hey, is this still a good network relationship building opportunity? And that's why every restaurant is slammed. Every venue is booked. Coffee shops are booked out because security leaders and practitioners are they're networking and doing a lot of that catch-up pieces here. Like, I think the time of going to a conference and saying, I know nothing about that topic anymore, I think we're kind of past that. That's going to be more the exception. So I think they're looking for, how am I continuing to build relationships? How am I networking? And is this going to be a good use of time from that perspective? Because the reality is, any security leader can get all the information about any vendor, either through their Gartner subscriptions, partners, friends, whomever it is, and vendors will fly their
research.
Yeah, exactly, right? Everyone. So I think it's about the networking pieces here.
Shameless plug. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, I think in the past I might have thought that CISOs were coming to RSA to figure out what was the newest, coolest silver bullet foundry and bring a shopping list and figure out what can I buy to solve my problems. And I think that there's a little bit of silver bullet exhaustion, maybe. We're very aware that we can keep buying tools and solutions, and it doesn't necessarily help us really manage our risks. So now I think CISOs are coming to say, who else has my problems? And how are they solving them? Because maybe it is a tool or a technology, or maybe it's a process, or maybe it's a relationship, or maybe it's a way of working. And so I think that's kind of what's on CISOs' minds now. They want to focus in on the problems that are really hard for them to solve.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's why there are so many birds of a feather roundtable sessions. And I think those are awesome because they're peer. I'm facilitating one this week, but that's where, 20 or 30 people come together. It's not a presentation. They get to kumbaya, or not really kumbaya, but they're going to kind of discuss, with their peers, what their problem is and how they've solved it or not solved it. But I think, probably 72% of the CISOs that are here are trying to figure out what zero trust is.
Still. I agree with that.
Low.
Low.
My completely unofficial survey results there on that.
It's not pretty accurate.
I think it's accurate. Yeah. 72.6, but I was rounding down.
Oh, good. Thanks for kind of sparing us from the 0.6. What's interesting is I worked in a research in an industry consortium, and a lot of the engagements were not as big as RSA, but I did learn that the higher you go in an organization, especially a bigger organization, kind of the lonelier it gets. The amount of people you can sort of really open up to and talk about your insecurities. I don't know this, what's going on. Am I doing the right thing? Is my strategy right? Are we going the right direction? You can ask that question in some ways to vendors and to colleagues, but you want to talk to people who are wrestling with similar kind of, or maybe they're not wrestling with the same problems. They've already solved it, or how they're going about it. And the other is that the executives, the boards of their organizations, they're asking them two questions. What's on the forefront that can harm us? What's on the forefront that can help us? Because I don't want to miss either. I don't want to get hit by something. I also don't want to miss the next Uber, the next Airbnb, the next whatever. right? And then all of a sudden, we lost a big opportunity to transform our business and, become the next thing we need to become. So it is that sort of raised periscope, being able to take a look and then connect. It's not just human connection. That's all nice. It's good to get together again, but it is that interpersonal conversation. How about a parting thought, Allison, if you want to kick us off with sort of, if I was going to advise the Agile CISO, what would you impart to them?
If I was going to advise the Agile CISO, or let's just say the new CISO, I think that folks come into a new gig or maybe are at their gig and they think about technology, team, and culture. And a lot of us who are in the CISO seat, we're nerds, so we focus in on the technology. But it's actually culture that is really going to be the game changer and whether you kind of win or lose at the game you're playing.
Yeah.
I would say get out there and actually meet your business partners, like meet the other business leaders, and not just once a quarter, right? Like find a time, find a reason to listen to what they're actually working on, what their expectations are for that quarter, for that month. Because I think there's a lot of security leaders who kind of get sucked into the tech bubble of where they just talk to the CIOs, CTO, and they don't actually ever really talk to the business and say, oh, you have to grow your footprint by 30% and expand retail locations to this to hit these numbers. And that means blah, 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 right? And so I would say really get out there and meet those business partners in a meaningful way.
Good advice. Jennifer?
I think for the sake of shifting gears and not being repetitive, like, I agree with both of my panelists over here because that's boring.
Violent agreement on everything.
I think there's two things, and that's that, I think that the CISO shouldn't be, or any professional really, but especially a technical or security professional, should not be expected and expect themselves to know everything. It is fine to ask questions. It is fine to say, I don't know. It is fine to say there's a problem I don't know how to solve. It's fine to ask peers. It's fine to ask, I think, anybody about those things. I know some stuff is sensitive, but for the most case, having people you trust to go to for those types of things, to ask those questions and help solve the problems. And then I'll also just throw out like a tool that I've recently stumbled on that I like a lot. Whereas if you did come from one of those kind of siloed domain areas and you feel like, you have some blind spots, I'm really digging Sunil's Cyber Defense Matrix. So there's a book, you can get it on ebook, and they're giving them away here as well. But it's really nice because it takes kind of the NIST concept from that framework and makes it really easy and consumable to use. It talks about like left of boom, right of boom, and breaks down the 5 different assets and the 5 different, like detect, respond, et cetera. Yeah. And so it's nice. You can't just glance at it. You need to read the definitions because they're not what you would think they would be. But it's a great way to kind of, I think, evaluate yourself as a professional to see where you tend to cluster your attention, and then to kind of fill that out a little bit, make sure that you have the people, the processes, and the products to address each of those, whichever of those squares are relevant to your business model and your architecture. I think that's a great kind of easy, like a 2-hour exercise to get some visibility into your blind spots. I think that's cool.
He was just here in neon green pants.
Yeah, he was walking by.
So,
did he really?
Yeah, that's what I was waving at. I was
he knew I was talking about him.
That's subliminal. He planned that all the time. So you would mention
But neon green pants. Like they were neon green.
By the way, you're a newly minted author. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your book and how we can get it?
Okay, so my first book I co-authored with other people. So this is my first book by myself. It's Wireless Security Architecture, but I think I kind of alluded to earlier. It walks any networking professional or any IT professional. Barrier of entry is like you need like network plus level knowledge, but it walks them through understanding kind of security mindset, risk, compliance, who needs to be doing what in the organization, what to do if you don't have those people in your organization, how to make some gut instinct calls if you don't have a CISO, for example. And then it gets into the nitty-gritty details of how the protocol specifications work, when to use what. And when Wi-Fi specifically, we have new security suite that's WPA3. It talks about, there's a lot of opportunity to make that fail miserably. So there's a lot of conversation around how to get there. It's meant to have a shelf life of 5 years, so it's broader than very specific things. And then in the back is where I threw all of the stuff that won't that won't live the life of the book. So there's stuff about zero trust and BYOD and remote workforce, and quite a bit about non-Wi-Fi wireless, including private cellular, which is an emergent use case for enterprises, and some other IoT and industrial automation stuff.
Really smart. Build in some obsolescence. You can have a second and a third edition.
There we go. Yes.
Way to go. So my parting thought would be, go learn the business. Yeah. Spend a day in the warehouse, unpack a truck, go stand next to a teller at a teller window, go mow a lawn, or whatever it is you do. Go, irrigate the golf course. Whatever your company is, truck roll to do install of a network at someone's home. There's nothing like being in the field, and do it more than just once. Don't just do it the first week or first 6 months of your job. Every quarter, every once in a while, go back out and learn a different part of the job. Go sit down with the finance people and sit through their team meeting and their presentation, what they're going to take to the board or to the CEO. Learn the business, because how can you secure what you don't understand? Right? It's all
Mitch,
part of it. Yeah.
Instead of Undercover Boss, should we have a Tech Strong TV series that's Undercover CISO, where the CISO goes undercover in the business and takes on a different role?
So like a Tom Cruise kind of movie, Top Gun Maverick-ish kind of thing?
I like it.
Yeah, that's a great movie, by the way. I think it's a great idea.
I haven't seen it yet, but yes, I will watch the movie.
Oh, you got to see that.
It's such a good reality show.
And,
Wouldn't it though?
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, have you seen Undercover Boss?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
There's some interesting episodes. Yes, there's some really good ones. Well, there's no litmus test, but Allison, you're now a member. You're part of the team.
All right.
So you have to come back now. You don't have a choice.
Good
crew. Anthony, good to be with us. Jennifer, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us for this special edition of CISO Talk. As you can tell, we're trying to grapple ourselves with what those challenges are and help each other with ideas and experiences that we're having. We hope that's been useful to you. Definitely want you to stick around. Our next segment is going to be Tech Strong Women with Charlene O'Hanlon, and she's going to be hosting some very special conversation about women in tech. So don't go away. Stay tuned. Same bat channel, same bat station. We'll see you in a bit.
Awesome. Thank you.